as something that you wanted to pursue as a career?
Well, probably in this room, because I went to see that movie, The Christmas Farm Inn, and then I was also lit up by animation and movies, and I would, every weekend I would open up, you guys are all too young, but it was called the movie pages, and you could open up the newspaper and read all the ads for all the movies and reviews, some of them written by you when I was growing up, and I was obsessed. And then there was always like a little tiny, I would go over every corner, and there was a little tiny cheap ad for, I don't remember what this theater was called before it was named after Bill, but it was
Beaumont.
What's that?
The Beaumont.
Yeah, so it was an ad for the Beaumont, and they would show short animated films from around the world. Spike and Mike would come here, and anytime you wanted to watch a movie that was like sort of off the circuit, it was here. You could go. I grew up in Coconut Grove, so the Grove movie theater played exclusively Rocky Horror and The Gods Must Be Crazy, and basically nothing else. But if it had played movies, that I would have gone there too. This was the spot.
And then, did you, like, when you went to school, was the plan always to study film, or was that something that came later in terms?
It was, no, I did everything I could to avoid it. I went to a liberal arts college. I didn't go to film school or art school. I studied computer science. I was thinking about it today because there's the quotation, from 2001, which is probably the movie that I saw. This is, again, such a cheeseball, but that's the movie I saw in college where like everybody left and I stayed. And the people I went with were like, this is so boring, we have to go. And they went to like a frat party and I stayed and watched the whole thing. It was like me and two other dorks in the theater. And I was like, that's it. That's what I'm gonna do. And then I was set off on, So it was touch and go there for a while. It seemed like a bad idea.
Kubrick is like one of my favorites, so, and I'm with you in 2001.
But that thing where they're dancing,
yes,
right, to the waltz, it must have played like a really broad joke, as broad as the Tarzan joke.
Right. And it's Hal Ashby, who is not necessarily known, not necessarily for like laugh out loud comedies like this was. I mean, a lot of his movies had humor and humorous content in them, but I had never seen this. So this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, like this was
man.
my first time, and I was just struck by how funny it is.
Really funny. Yeah, like In the Heat of the Night is not funny, and Thomas Crown Affair isn't really funny, and something about his movies in the 70s. He's got 4 great comedies, right? There's this one. There's his first movie, The Landlord. The Last Detail with Jack Nicholson, and Shampoo. Oh, 5 great comedies in a decade. Because Being There. All those movies for one dude, forget it. And then after the 70s, everything he made was bad. I don't know what happened. But that's as good a run as you can have.
Yeah, some directors peak, and then like you look at their careers and they peak, and then some directors just keep going.
And so that's 5. Add Coming Home, also in the 70s, right? A drama, and then I guess Bound for Glory, which is like kind of boring, but really great looking.
Why did you gravitate towards the comedy? Was there something about that? Were you always interested in
It's because
comedy?
I was short in high school. So I had to do something. Or I was going to get beat up. So I had to get funny. But I think that if I was like tall in high school, I probably would have made dramas. Do you know what I mean? I'm not confident enough for that. But Hal Ashby's tall. Did you see him in the movie? He's playing the racing game at the carnival with Harold for 2 seconds. Can you imagine that guy walking into your office? You're a studio head. That dude walks in, this giant white giant beard, crazy blonde hair, sunglasses. He and Cat Stevens and a UCLA student walk in and say, "We have this movie for you." It's called Harold and Maude. And then the movie bombed, by the way. A terrible and a commercial and critical failure. Roger Ebert hated it. Somebody else, Vincent Canby, hated it. Pauline Kael seemed to like it fine. And audiences hated it. But at that time, a movie could play in a theater for years, and it eventually made its money back in repertory theaters and became a cult classic. And people, I read a story today about how there was a theater in Minneapolis that played it so long the local people protested and begged them to stop.
Your sense of comedy, though, is kind of like, I wouldn't say the opposite of this, but it's extremely accessible, it's very audience friendly, but it's also incredibly clever and imaginative.
Somewhat dark.
Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs, which I saw because I had to review it, and
What did you think walking into that?
well, I was dreading it because I tended not to review kids movies, right? And a lot of these kids movies, you get stuck in them, and they're made for kids, and you're like,
And this is like middle of the day.
It was the middle of the day.
Like these screenings they do for reviewers.
Yes.
It's the worst conditions.
Yes, it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I don't remember why I said yes. But I don't know if you guys have seen Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs, but it is just one of the most delightful things. Like right from the start, you're like, oh, I'm in good hands here. And there's so much cleverness, there's so much imagination in that movie, and it's really funny. And it also made me really hungry.
Yeah. We don't smoke pot, but we make really stony movies.
What do you think it is about the humor genre that you gravitated towards? Because pretty much all of your the 21 Jump Street, which again was a movie that people were super skeptical of, and then you go see it, and it's just hilarious. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you do. Mitchell's versus the Machines, even Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse isn't necessarily a comedy, but it's very Spider-Pig. That's all you have to say, right? Spider-Pig.
Plays. I'm shocked, but they love the pig.
But comedy's hard, isn't it? I mean, the old saying is, dying is easy, or drama is easy, comedy is hard. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that type of creativity that leads you to realize, oh, hey, this is funny to not just me, but to other people.
Well, I have funny parents who are here, and we watched movies as a family, and I was very attuned to what made my dad laugh. He's got a very, he's not afraid of a dad joke, but he's got a very astute sense of humor. And I remember watching this movie with him on, back home. I would rent a lot, and it's the opening sequence slays him, and so like you're always trying to make your movie for one person or a couple of people. And I'm always more or less trying to make my dad laugh, and I took him to a screening of Cloudy, and he laughed so hard, and it was with a lot of it was on the studio lot, and it was a lot of I think there were reviewers there. It was like a closed door early screen. The movie hadn't been released yet, and there was a lot of studio executives and publicists there. And Dad, you really liked the movie a lot. I don't remember this story. And he said to me, "Son, this movie's wonderful." And he said it so loud that all the people who knew that I had introduced him to turned around. I was like, "You can't say that. You have to say that privately." But yeah, I would just say that to land a laugh, you have to be, you can either be lucky or precise. You need to be a little bit of both. And what's clear from watching this movie and any of his movies, there's an incredible amount of control, right? And there's also an incredible amount of spontaneity. And so you see this sense of spontaneity in the performances and happy accidents that are happening, and also unbelievable design in what the shot is going to be that's going to make you laugh when you cut to Vivian Pickles, And then this spontaneity, there's all these, this movie's full of amazing transitions, right? Like, right, he was so-and-so's, he was Harry Truman's right-hand man, and you cut to the guy with no right hand. And it's full of stuff like that. And some of that is Colin Higgins, who wrote the screenplay and was on set the whole time and was a producer on the movie. But there's also spontaneity in the editing, the way that he will use a cut that's unexpected. You know, that like, you can imagine an editor just being like pitching those cuts for his whole career, and then finally he's the director, and he gets to say yes to the editor whenever he's got a weird idea. So to land a laugh like this, and like consistently landing laughs in an audience, you have to be really tuned in to how somebody is feeling while they watch the movie. Just like you are if you're like a good horror director or you're a good dramatic director, you can feel it when you're, you know, when you have people's undivided attention, and you have to have control about what you present in what order, and you can feel it. The only way I can do it is to show the movie a bunch of times and figure out like how I'm screwing it up and then fix it.
But you also, I remember it's 21 Jump Street, where you have the running gag of the car that's full of explosives. And I don't know if you guys have seen 21 Jump Street, but there's this car that's full of explosives, and several times during the movie, like this, you know, like you can tell the car's gonna get hit or crash, and the soundtrack swells, dun 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 dun, and then it does it, right?
Yeah.
And like you do that joke like 3 or 4 times, and then it pays off very unexpectedly.
Right, somebody hits like a giant gas tanker, then they they just hit all these explosive things in a row and nothing happens, and then they hit a chicken truck and the chicken truck explodes. But I'd say we're still kind of, like our producing career is kind of just starting. We're trying to learn how to do it. One of the things you figure out is that like, one person's creativity doesn't really scale, and so you have to figure out how to multiply by collaborating with other people and trying to identify people that you really want to work with and see if you can help them out, and you can just be the, you know, like the person who gives that person a boost. And the funny thing about that is, in general, so during the pandemic, I went crazy several times. But the first time I went crazy was like, it was that first summer, and I was writing the sequel to Spiderverse, believe it or not. And I was losing my mind, and I wasn't getting anywhere, and I went on a walk with another writer-director friend, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I've never had writer's block in my life. He's like, oh, your problem is you're not hanging out with anybody. You're not talking to any other people. And like, that's the thing, is like, you work in a partnership, and this filmmaking is a team sport, so you have to go on more walks with me, basically, and you have to interact with more people. And I found that consistent. That when you need to like put wind in your sails, that's more or less it.
I'm curious on your take, because you work in television, feature films, and I'm curious on your take. You know, we hear a lot that, you know, this cinema is dying, that studios are, unless it's a superhero, you know, property or whatever, everything's going to Netflix. You produced a movie for Netflix, and you've also done a lot of TV work. What's your perspective on the whole? You know, is there going to be like a Hollywood, is there going to be another James Earl Brooks who gets movies released to theaters?
Well, we have 3 movies coming out to theaters next year. I think in the first 2 quarters of next year. And with any luck, a 4th. And so it hasn't been our experience. We're getting stuff made, and it's theatrical. I think there's going to, I mean, Tom Cruise, like, would beg to differ, right? Like, that movie's saved movies. Sony's released a bunch of movies this year that like were, you know, like doubles and triples, right? They're like investing heavy in theatrical. I think we're about to see a contraction in streaming So I think it's like we're all going to have to learn to live together, you know. And the definition of what is theatrical or what has urgency is going to be evolving. But I don't think it's restricted to franchises. I mean, like Jordan Peele released a huge hit movie that's an art film about Edward Muybridge. Right? The movie's called Nope, and it's really good. And there's something, you know, and it's just people went to see that because he has a reputation now. But Get Out was the same way. It was like, oh, this is an original thing that I can't get anywhere else. I'm really curious what happens with Avatar, right? A franchise that hasn't been in the zeitgeist in a second, but that was like the last movie where people took their grandparents because they were like, I just want to see this weird thing before I go, you know. So I think I literally had a friend who took her grandma to it because she's like, I want to see the future of movies. So I do think that still, and Minions was a big hit. So like, I still think people want to go to the movies. Teenagers, as long as like the drinking age is 21, kids need a place to go without their parents, right? And people need things to do at night. And I think it's still good. I think we're gonna have fewer theaters, whatever it is. Like when we hit the ridiculous number of screens, it was like 7,000. I think domestically. I think that's going to contract. But that's probably all right. So I don't know. I think theatrical is here to stay. I don't think it's going to go the way of the phonograph, which, by the way, is also here to stay. Yeah.
Have you seen Barbarian?
No, I heard it was great.
It's
Really?
It's worth the imagery.
Really?
And it has one of the best trailers ever.
Really?
It doesn't spoil.
Did anybody see Bros? That came out this week.
We screened that here.
Really?
Yeah.
How did it play? It didn't work. Didn't connect.
You know, I don't know if anybody is here from Universal Studios, but it didn't.
Okay. Well, shout out.
If I was reviewing it,
Shout out to comedies trying to make it in the marketplace.
Well, that's the mistake that movie makes, is that it's really good if it's a comedy,
Right.
but then it turns dramatic.
see.
And it's one of the most baffling things, and it's one of the things that I really like about your work, is that, yeah, you get dramatic stuff in there, but you never lose sight of that it's a comedy.
Right.
And I think the problem with Bros is that, like many rom-coms, it takes this like dramatic turn, and that's not what you want from the movie. So it's good when it's funny,
Right.
but there are issues there. So
I haven't seen it. Excited to see it. But you know, that's like a big studio comedy. That's theatrical. That's like trying to, you know, like people are swinging the bat, and so I'm rooting for everybody who's out there trying to. I do believe that a big comedy can play with an audience. That there's something about you guys experiencing. There's something about laughing together that's like special. It's not the same as like laughing at home and tweeting about it.
all right, so I'm going to open it up for questions from you guys, students. Yes.
Nice. I love this Q&A. Okay.
Oh yeah, I just asked him.
Okay.
Does he live around where you live, or does he live around where you
Oh, this can be signed. After the show, come on up. Oh yeah, what is your name? Did you want them to get together at the end? Yeah, that's the secret sauce of that movie.
Secret sauce.
Thank you for saying all that nice stuff. I'm not. I'm going with it.
Yes, you in the blue shirt.
I want to ask why are you so afraid of the end? As a writer, what is?
Why am I afraid of the end?
Yeah, because the way that I was taught writing was very much like intrinsic rather than extrinsic. Write for yourself. So I just wanted to, do it.
Help me one more time. Help me understand the question
I'm so sorry.
even better. So what am I? So why? So expand on that. Why? What do you mean by being afraid of the end?
When you were talking earlier,
Yeah. No, it's all good.
when you were talking earlier, you expressed kind of anxiety about in the wall, like a writer's block.
Yeah, sure.
And
Sure.
I think in the context of careers in particular.
Oh, right. Like, is this a? Yeah.
That's kind of like where we're.
Because I just can't. I'm not good at anything else. I'm not even good at this. I don't know what I can do. I would be the worst employee. I had to ask my parents if anyone in our family had ever had a boss to try to understand why I was so bad at having a boss. We had no one's ever had a boss. So I wouldn't be good. I would be really out of work. I don't know if you can think of a good job, but I guess you wonder. Because I think it's mysterious. Like where the ideas come from, I think is mysterious, and someday it might just stop. And so you kind of go, I wonder what I have to do. How do you have to develop your practice in such a way that you can stay fed, that your guns stay loaded. And a lot of it is just like remembering to not work every second of the day and go and experience a few things. But yeah, I don't know. That's a really good point, that we should just accept death. We should embrace the end. Yeah, I think that's true, actually.